Hello, my name is Knispel, and I'm a competitive battlefield tanker as well as an infantry player. I've probably got about 5 years of comp experience under my belt, which of that I have spent most of in the Asia, North America, Australia and Oceania scene. I've played FPS and real-time strategy games pretty much my whole entire life since I was 12 years old, and I'm also a gym enthusiast. But today I'll be bringing you some review on what I thought of the Battlefield 2042 beta, as well as some ideas of what things they did right, things that they could work on, and some ideas on what could be in the future. If this is your first time on my channel, I mostly basically put up videos of vehicle infantry gameplay, as well as give tips and tricks as how you can improve your game, not only for the Battlefield series, but hopefully in the future for other games as well as maybe adding some other things if popular by demand. So sit on back, put a glass of tea, coffee, or your preferred alcohol of choice, and let's get into the review right here. So to start off, let's talk about what they have done well in the beta so far. So my early reflections of the tank gameplay, it does feel like a tank. It isn't completely hopeless to the point that it was like in Battlefield 5 in the alpha and the beta, where it was just basically a glorified hitbox which could get easily destroyed with at least of like 1 or 2 or 3 rockets, which at the start of the game, I think it was the payout rocket, which did an insane amount of damage, and you had like an insane amount of them. I think it was something like 5 or 6, and if anyone remembers what the payout was like, especially on game release, there was almost no other reason to run a rocket launcher besides that, because it not only did high damage to our vehicles, it had an insane splash damage, and almost to the point where there was almost no reason to run your main weapon at all. You might as well just run the payout, and there was no actual real gunfight going on whatsoever. Luckily for this game, it wasn't really like that. The amount of damage the rockets did in this game were not too little, but they were not too much at the same time. So I think they found kind of like a nice balance. And as far as I noticed, I didn't think there was any glancing blows or any implementation of that. So it felt like very much what it was like in Battlefield 4 when it comes to like dealing with armed vehicles. The mobility setup is very similar, I think, from Battlefield 5, but it does feel a little bit floaty, but I'm not sure if that's just because of the increased mobility, which I really do enjoy and like that they have that, but it does feel a little bit sluggish in some ways and how it interacts with the environment. So hopefully, just because this is the beta, they can be polished on and go on a bit more detail as to how to improve that as well. But the main thing is I don't have to spend so much time driving around getting from flag to flag to find a way to help the team out and get into the action, because there's nothing more that I hate than a driving simulator. If I wanted to play a driving simulator game, Need for Speed, that's a thing. Also, the ammo system is not what I would fear it would be. I did kinda not mind the ammo system, how it worked in Battlefield 5, but with how tanking worked, I found that if you were a decent tanker, it was quite common for people would switch teams, or on your own team, convinced that you were a hacker or etc. for whatever reason they thought, and blow up your own ammo depots, and there was nothing you could do to get out and repair them and to get back into your tank, because they would either steal it or they would just keep blowing up the ammo depot, and then you couldn't get any ammo whatsoever. But I did enjoy the fact with the ammo system in Battlefield 5, you were quite able to 1vx enemy vehicles. And what I mean by that, you could run into 2 tanks, maybe even 3, maybe even 4, and if you knew how you position yourself, make them choke their shots, or get into a very ideal opportunity to get it behind them so you can maximize the kill time, you could actually do that. Whereas in previous Battlefield titles, there was these situations, even in tank 1v1s, where you would have this really awkward standoff because both of you had run out of rockets, and then all you can really do is jump out and RPG them, or just kind of like stare at each other. And then with also situations, yeah, once you ran into the other tank coming to trade kill, there was not much you could really do as to outplay them. I found the ammo reload system in this game being quite generous, but not to the point where it was completely broken, where you could just mindlessly spam shells and not think about when and where to use them. So that's another plus in my book. Another plus in my books was in regards to the hitbox size between the two tanks. So the fact that the US and Russian tanks have very similar hitbox sizes, which in my opinion is needed for balance, because it's the same with our infantry, and if you play like things like Quake or Overwatch and stuff, like hitbox's size comes into play, and also the HP around it, but we won't go into too much the HP thing, but you kind of get what my point is here. If they're going to have two tanks for two different factions, they need to be somewhat similar size so that there's not a huge advantage over the other. Also, a thing that I think people might have overlooked, especially with the older titles of Battlefield 5 comparing to this, is both tanks actually, when you look over the backside of your tank, they have the same gun depression. So in Battlefield 4 and other titles, the T90 actually had a better gun depression when looking behind the tank, so it was quite easy to still kill people behind you, whereas the M1 Abram in Battlefield 4, and I'm pretty sure it was in Battlefield 5 as well, you couldn't aim down as well behind yourself, so it was kind of unbalanced, and it was kind of like the T90 and the Type 99 from Battlefield 4 was just better overall. And then later down the track, they try to improve some of the patches by cleverly giving the M1 Abram better acceleration and top speed. So kind of like mid to long ranges, it actually could kind of dodge shells better, as well as having a top acceleration speed that was better than the other two tanks, which means it could get to places faster. I guess that's one way you can balance factions. I found that the TTK between vehicle to vehicle combat generally being good, so it didn't take an insane amount of time to kill enemy tanks or jeeps, transports and things like that, or shoot down scout helis, otherwise known as the Nightbird now, and the attack chopper. I couldn't really get a shell on the jet because the jets were so damn buggy and teleporting that I couldn't just line up any shot properly, which kind of sucked. But I do think the transport heli, otherwise known as the Hind and Osprey, really need the health dropped on it. And the reason why is simply, yeah, sure, transport choppers have always kind of had it hard, but they've always generally been a 2-tap hit, or, you know, a little bit more than that. In this game, once people kind of like figured out how to use them properly, it was actually a valid strat. While dogfighting, yes, I mean dogfight the other jet, where it would just outturn the other jet and just ram it and win. It didn't even need the guns. It was so tanky, it could literally ram something and survive. And that was the same for attack choppers, little birds. And what I found people would do was they would just nosedive me with it or hover above me, and because I couldn't shell it and kill it, people would just jump all out of the vehicle and just C4 me to death, and it was just, there's nothing I could do about it. Basically, you are at the mercy of the transport choppers. Who would have known that would be a thing in this game? Anyway, back to the topic at hand. I enjoyed the fact there was less heavy vehicles per map, so it had a reasonable flow to it. So for example, things looking back in the past, maps like Silk Road, Siege of Shanghai, even Zafford and Goldmud, I just found that there was too many vehicles, to the point where like there was almost no other reason but to run engineer and public games, and kind of giving other classes an actual chance to flourish on every kind of map. So it gives just a better positive experience for both parts. The default smoothbore cannon I found wasn't too overpowered. It was kind of like the blend of both worlds. It felt very similar to what like the anti-tank barrel cannons were for Battlefield 5 for like the Panzer and I guess the Valentine, where it was kind of like a jack of all trades. It wasn't insanely overpowered with the splash damage, but at the same time it wasn't insane and like just destroying every vehicle. It was basically just well balanced out in my opinion, so I was quite happy with that. As far as what other shell types that are going to be in the game, there's apparently meant to be HE shell as well as some kind of form, I guess, of a Sabo shell coming. So it'll be very interesting once the full game comes out, how they'll balance out. I also enjoy the fact there's no getting out of vehicle animation, but there's still one getting in. I guess you can't have both, but at least for one of the things, I'll take that as a win. So it allows for you to like kind of do a bit more clutch plays and maybe get out of the vehicle and do an RPG rocket on the a chopper flying by, or just to get out really quickly and repair, which is great. I also do enjoy the idea that the auto replenish health is come back, because it seemed to really annoy people that you could sit inside the tank and repair it, but even though you could do 0.001 damage and it would cancel it, so it was worthwhile. If you think the tank was sitting still, it was probably repairing, and might as well just put a little bit of damage in it just to keep a little pressure on, so it couldn't really heal up in the first place. But now you have to get out and actually repair, which is, I think, you know, it's good. It doesn't bother me. Either system kind of worked, but I do think it got a lot more hate than it really should have, because like there was a way to counter it, and I don't think people considered that. Also, on a silly note, which I do think is somewhat cool, you still can ram enemy vehicles and it being a valid strat. Please do not remove this. I would never get tired of this. Now, before I get into other topics, I do want to cover some things I wish I got around to looking at. So if you did or happen to know anything about this, please do comment in the video below, because I would love to know more about it. So with the vehicle decouple, where it's basically the turret, you can basically decouple it from your tank chassis. So when I, for example, I'm looking one direction with the turret, if I press my WADS keys or whatever your keys you have assigned to turn the tank chassis, I wouldn't have to fight against my own mouse to control where the turret was aiming. I didn't get around to actually having a look into the game settings if you could actually change that or not, or if it was actually even available in the first place. So I thought that might have not been the case of it being in there, because like we didn't even have like the big map in this game, and I kind of just wanted to dive in and enjoy the game for what it was and get as much footage out of this and my thoughts and opinions on the game, as well as looking at the exact TTK damage values of the LMG and any of the other things. Or if you are pretty good with getting data mining and getting exact values on like how big, for example, the splash damage actually is, or reload times and damage output and damage drop off, I love that kind of stuff. So if you do have access to that kind of stuff, just once again hit me up with it. One thing I also wanted to really try out, because it's almost been in every single battlefield, is the glitch shot. Long story short, there's a position on the top of the tank turret where the shell would go through and it would count as a shot to the rear of the vehicle and do extra damage. And I thought this added a slight little bit of depth into tanking and made it a little bit more skillful, and just kind of like just putting some more time into actually getting decent angle shots, whilst avoiding getting hit with that dreaded glitch shot in the first place as well, because every single title it was actually counterable in the first place. So I don't think it was really a bad thing to be in the game, because it did add something more to the game tank play. Now to move on to more the criticism, I thought I would start off some of the positive things first, because when making constructive feedback, it's generally received better from all the research I've at least read through my sports science degree. It's better to go in with some of the positive things first before going into some of the things that need some construction or addressing. I really do think some hard defense countermeasures are needed, specifically against aircraft and the EMP drone. Maybe like a guided rocket, for example, maybe it's something a bit like the tow missile, but it cannot do a one hit to aircraft vehicle. And the reason why I say that is, if I'm pretty sure I've read the data mining right and some of the other things that are going to be featured in the game, there looks like there's going to be some kind of form of a tow missile or some kind of like missile that you can control towards your target. If not, then I guess I just have to shrug and I got that information wrong. If that's true, there's going to be so many things that the attack chopper has to worry about in the first place, and as well as other aircraft, that it might be a horrible experience. And it might be a bit like the whole scenario, I think, in Battlefield 4 at the launch, where the S-Straw was just such a useful tool and insane at just doing anything, that like just no aircraft in the game would ever exist if you were a Straw master. Also, I do think just some of the defense countermeasures could allow for some more aggressive tank gameplay as well. I'm not thinking you need something like to the point where active protection existed. And what I mean by that was basically you had like God mode for like a solid like 5 seconds or so, and you didn't need to worry about whatever was in front of you. It didn't require any real thought process of what maybe might be ahead of you. You just came around the corner, destroyed everything, and survived. Like, it was a decent solid counter at dealing with aircraft strafing you, and it kind of gave you a fighting chance to kind of get away. But in this game, I just don't think it would really work. It would be better if maybe something like reactive armor came back, so that it kind of brought to the level of depth and angling and changing angles for tanks, as well as giving that extra bit of HP. I do think the auto health system repair from the previous titles of Battlefield gets a lot more hate than it should, because I feel like it was kind of like the best of both worlds. So like how it worked was, think of it like as Roadhog from Overwatch, if you've ever played Overwatch. He's basically a tanker main in that game, where one of his abilities was to instantly get back his health, right? At the cost that he was a giant hitbox to hit, so he could take a lot of damage. But in turn, he had a lot of HP, and he could one of his abilities was to get more health, so he could kind of take the hit and distract more. It's kind of similar to how the HP boost works in this game, and in Battlefield 5 you only had one of them, which basically means that you had to time it and use it exactly when you needed to get away from a situation which was a death sentence. So you had to even think even harder when to use it, because sometimes there was no way for you to get ammo reload for it for any time soon. So it was very situational, and you had to time it very correct. As well as when you consider the ammo system in this game, well, there is no ammo, so how would you balance it in this game? Well, it's simple. Just like how active protection worked, you would have to have a very lengthy cooldown time to use it. So that's how would I balance it. I do think there should be some better traverse and speed for the vehicle chassis, so it kind of be a bit more responsive in turning and angling your tank. So when you get into 1v1s, you can kind of angle your armor better and take less damage, as well as being able to generally move around better and turn around, so it's a bit more fast. As well, I would apply this to the turret as well. I might get a lot of hate for this, and I did for a long period of time vouch for that it was just something that you had to get used to. I don't think it needs to be completely removed, or just simply just tone it down a bit so that it actually rewards tracking and aiming, especially at closer ranges, because the only way you can kind of like really track things super effectively is at medium and long range. And the feedback I normally get from Battlefield 5, especially watching newer tankers or inexperienced tankers, the first thing they do is, the only real feedback they get and feel good in the tank is sitting super far back and just in big open areas, racking up a huge kill streak, and only being able to help out on certain maps where the tank, it takes no skill to really flourish in at all. I think maps like, for example, like Rotterdam and Devastation, a lot of tankers I didn't see really do well in that, because they didn't know how to, in the first place, to do aggressive tanking, and only with experience from previous Battlefield titles you knew how to do that. In Battlefield 5, it just enforced poor learning skills or things to actually work on to what makes a tanker good and actually productive for their team, besides from just being on big open maps and holding like big open spaces. Like, they need the experience of being able to have some tools useful for them so that they can have more aggressive play. And I think changing the turret system to the point where like it's a little bit more rewarding to actually develop aim would be a good start. I did feel like the TTK on the LMG could feel a little bit slower at times. I'm not sure if that was just over long ranges or just kind of like hit reg issues at close range. But once again, I'm going to reserve this until once I get access to like the actual HMG and other things in the full game. In regards to tank on tank combat, I'm not sure if it was just a bug or maybe something I didn't pick up on, but I don't think you can actually backshot a tank in this game and do extra damage at all. So when I snuck up on tanks several times and got behind them, just from the years and years of experience playing other Battlefield games, it did the same damage from the front or the sides, which kind of left me a bit puzzled. So there's no reward for like playing patient and, you know, having a calm trigger finger to be able to take advantage of certain situations and just play smart. And it was just kind of disappointing. And once again, that was another way you could 1vx several other tanks. I also do think the repair tool needs a little bit more work. I did not mind like the cooldown and the length of the repair tool, but what really annoyed me was once I finished repairing, got back into the vehicle, and then 5-6 minutes later I got back out, it hadn't cooled down. I don't care about what you think, but that just does not fly with me whatsoever, Chief. That needs to go. Enough said. I am a little worried that there's several gunner seats in the tank, and depending on how useful the loadouts that are rumored by Temporal, how they could be very effective and overpowered at times. But once again, we didn't have really access to that, so I can't really comment on that. But one thing that really did annoy me that was a feature in the tank, by God, I really hate the grenade launcher on it. I honestly hope it's not as powerful as the fire nade in Battlefield 4. I'm probably going to cop a lot of heat for saying that, but basically how the fire nade worked in Battlefield 4 was you shot a fire nade out and it would basically get a player down to 5 or 10 HP, if not kill them, and stop a player from being able to re-peek the tank from a different angle, which is normally what good infantry did that were really good at taking out enemy vehicles. So I think that really needs to be kept in mind for better gameplay. So as long as the grenade launcher can't be spammed to an insane amount, I honestly don't mind if it being in the game, but I do not like the visual, how it kicks up so much dust and dirt. It makes it really hard for me as a tanker to see, and I guess with random gunners it probably did honestly annoy me more because they just spammed it the whole entire time. I guess in practice with good squad mates, etc., it's quite different, but because normally in pubs I generally like to solo tank by myself, it's something I just did not enjoy. Speaking about the different seats in the tank, I really did not enjoy when switching to the different gunner seats, then going back to the driver's seat, the tank would kind of like power down and then not be able to move or turn my turret or anything for a little bit. So it made it really hard in situations like where I was trying to take use of all the utility that the tank has, that seat switching was no longer a thing. A lot of good tankers from previous Battlefield games used that as a skill to really help improve their team be really more effective, so they could spend less players inside the one vehicle and out, you know, pushing flags or working different angles or focusing their vehicle better, because normally a lot of people forget the best way to kill a tank, or just in any gunfight philosophy, you try and get more people to work from different angles, so the player has to look left and right more chance of an error to happen and him choking. It would also help feel the tank be more responsive, which I feel like a lot of people will agree with me on that one. Another thing which really does aggravate me, and I don't think is acceptable at all, the zoom optic bug, which has been around since the Battlefield 5 alpha, which has never been addressed, is in this game. which basically you would go into the zoom optics and your whole screen would be black and you had to get in and out of the view again just to see something. But by that time that had happened and you fixed the issue, the infantry player, which has really good timing with the rockets, would have peeked you, shot a rocket and gone behind cover, and you missed your whole opportunity because of just a visual bug. That needs to go now, and I do not want to see it in the game's full release. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it is because it's been there for more than 3 years and it's transverse titles now, so there is no excuse for that to be in the game. Also, on a little side note, I do not enjoy how much visual shake and screen shake that I take, even just from one little bit of damage, especially just for the visuals, how the screen gets super glitchy and stuff. But I do feel like there's other things I need to talk about real quick. Things that can also be worked on outside the tank to help balance and gameplay and experience, I think that should be considered as well, is some of the gadgets and utility. The EMP drone, for example, is a gadget which can actually disable the vehicle so it can't shoot, fire, or simply use any of its countermeasures, which I found extremely broken, and given it the right situation and usage of it, you could basically just 100 and 0 a tank and they'll have no fighting chats to fight back. Now, before I go on about me complaining about it more, apparently it does have a limited range on how far it can go, but to give an example of that, I had a guy follow me from this flag I'm fighting on right now all the way to the Russian uncap and was just spamming it every 3 seconds on the cooldown, and there was nothing I could do to fight it. So I hope in practice it gets a bit more balanced or have a countermeasure to deal with it, and that wouldn't be an issue for me. To need to not be able to do 20-35 damage, it's just outrageous, and we need to obviously add the indicators of where the nades are. I'm sure the inf can agree on that one. Also, I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like the rockets gain velocity over time, which I don't know why it's a thing, but I kind of don't like that, and I would like to see that balanced out. Also, just to get into a very controversial topic, and before I even go any more in depth on this, thermal optics. Just to make it very clear where my stance is on this, in my opinion, I don't think they're necessary in this game. Only if all those things that I talked about before were addressed, I think you could get away with having no thermal optics in this game. But because I have to consider every argument in the community, I'm going to try and see if I can get the best of both worlds with this suggestion. For all those Battlefield veterans out there, specifically Battlefield 1, do you remember the heavy tank called the Saint Chamond? One of the loadouts specifically for this tank had a utility tool which was a searchlight, and how it worked was, for a very limited time, it was able to actively 3D spot everyone in front of it when active, with a certain cooldown time period, so that it could not be spammed completely the whole entire time. What if we apply this same mechanic but to thermal optics? So you had to actually think about when and where was the best time to use it. And the way I used it in Battlefield 1 was when I put a hole inside of a building or a lot of debris came down from an explosion, I would activate it so I could kind of track what was going on in front of me better. Or in a situation which it was extremely hard based on the visual texture in front of me that I could not see what was in front of me. But you could then go, oh, but that's you just not using your eyes. But I'm sure some people can agree with me, given some of the visual in this game in the past and the present, it wouldn't be a borderline broken idea if implemented correctly. So having a very significant cooldown time, so it became a situational tool that the tank could just use for more aggressive gameplay, or to be able to sit on an objective and actually cap it, because there's a lot of foliage around and angles that they could be sitting and waiting from. But once they've used it, there was no way they could just spam it and rely on it constantly. It simply now becomes another tool and utility that the tank can use, with some balance introduced into it. As long as also there's some hard counters to thermal, which would be flares, smokes, which worked in Battlefield 4, then you've got some countermeasure gameplay going on, which is fine by me, and I'm sure by others. Anyway, if I had to give a final rating out of 10 for the tank experience in Battlefield 2042, I would be giving it somewhere between a 6 and a 7, so probably a 6.5. That's, I think, a bit generous at this point given what we've got in the game, but it's not the end of the world. It's a beta, and I definitely think it can improve from here. Anyway, that's about my feedback for the video so far of what I could think off the top of my head. I was honestly expecting to be a 10-minute video before I started this, and it's now a 30-minute video, so I hope I didn't go too overboard while giving some interesting perspectives and thinking outside the box and some compromises along the way. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video and I didn't go over too much detail, or you enjoyed the detail and you'll like to come back, see some more content, give me some more ideas, leave some feedback in the comments, or maybe some things I didn't actually cover in the video so that I can cover in future videos for next time. Anyway, leave a like, comment, subscription, and I'll see you next time in the next video, and take it easy, guys.